everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt. With me, as usual, is the man who is currently working on a way to put a fruit roll-up in an IPA, Mr. Bobby Fleshman. Welcome back to the show.
Rock and roll.
And back on the show, the man who was extremely disappointed when he went into IHOP, Mr. Joel Hermansen.
Why was...
Because you were expecting hops.
True. Right. Fair enough. And I don't like pancakes, so that totally works.
We got a great guest this week. He is one of the biggest names in the home brewing movement. He's an award-winning home brewer. He's an author. He's a professional brewer. He's the founder of the Heretic Brewing Company in Fairfield, California. But most importantly, he is a podcaster, just like us. And you can hear him on the Brew Strong podcast, Mr. Jamil Zainasheff. Jamil Zainasheff. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we get started with, we've talked to a lot of brewers on the show, people who got their start doing craft brewing, and they all kind of have a similar story in that they started doing home brewing. How did you get started in it, and what was the impetus behind brewing your own beer?
My neighbor, Steve, he reached over the fence one day and handed me a beer, said, "Oh, you got to try this." And it was the best beer I had ever tasted to that point. And I'm like, "Steve, this is fantastic. Where do I buy this? What's it called?" He goes, "You can't buy it because I made it myself." And I was pretty blown away. Told my wife about it. I said, "Well, Steve just handed me this great beer that he brewed himself." And so for Christmas, she got me a Mr. Beer kit, and I started with that. And turned out terrible. Not necessarily the fault of the Mr. Beer people, but just my lack of knowledge. And that's something I can't stand. So I began to research and learn and practice and all that. And that's how I got started.
Jamil, do you have a science background at all, or was this just purely a passion play?
I did study some biochem at UC Davis, but I didn't study fermentation science at UC Davis.
I'm actually sitting with a UC Davis grad right now.
Well, I did the Master Brewers program there with Charlie and Michael Lewis, 2013. And I don't know if you can hear me there. You took your headphones off. Still good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before that, though, before I got into brewing school, I got into home brewing. And there was this network called the Brewing Network that I discovered in 2007. I was living in Boulder, Colorado. And if I'm not mistaken, that was like the second year of the Brewing Network. And I'm not sure when you joined that group of people, but you produced a shit ton of audio for me and a lot of other brewers. You wrote a few books on it.
Yeah. We started. The whole thing started in 2005 or 2006, and I remember my good friend John Plisse, he and Justin were starting it together in Justin's garage, and John he kept begging me. He's like, "Just come down and do a show with us. Come down and do a show. You'll enjoy it." And I'm like, all right, for you, I'll do it. Went down and really enjoyed the experience. And then after a couple of times of doing it, Justin was asking about, other shows and things like that. And Jonathan and I came up with the idea of doing this, what we call brewing with style, but Justin refused that name and called it the Jamil Show. So we did that. And then, ever since then, I've been doing a show or two shows. Sometimes I think we even did a weekly show for a while there since then. So that's almost 2 decades.
Yeah. And you were doing that as you were writing classic styles, brewing classic styles, or was that after?
I think I wrote Brewing Classic Styles just about that time. I think
'Cause I think
maybe
you're going through all of those styles as you went, so it
yeah.
made
I
sense.
think I must have. I'm not sure the timing which, but Brewing Classic Styles I think came out shortly thereafter, maybe 2006, 2007. I'm not sure.
And for all
I'm
the home
old.
brewers out there, they'll know that that's the cheat code. The Brewing Classic Styles book is how you metal. I mean, if you don't fuck it up, that's how you metal. Jamil was, you were very analytical, and you're very artistic, and you're very influential. You never said no all those years, and offering up what you knew. And a lot of
Oh,
people owe their homebrew medals and their breweries to what you did. I think in large part.
well, that's
We'll get to
very
that Mount
kind.
Rushmore question later. I promise you.
So, Jamil, I have to ask you this because I homebrewed for quite a long time, and I felt like I got to the point where I would have been happy to hand my beer over the fence like your neighbor did.
Hmm.
But you have a homebrew legacy that is it's unprecedented. I mean, I reading kind of your background, it's stunning. You've taken medals in the finals of the National Homebrew Competition every year since 2002. You've brewed beers in every style. How did you develop such a fluency, such a proficiency? Because for homebrewers like myself who struggle to be able to produce kind of and I very, not surprising to our listeners, but when I brewed, I stayed in one to two styles. Reading that is almost intimidating. Can you speak to that a little bit?
And before you start, make sure everyone understands that's the premise to Brewing Classic Styles. It was like the subtitle, right? It was that they had won medals. You had won medals in every one of those categories, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. I got a first place in every style, every individual style, and I was like, all right, I need a first place in every. First, I was like, well, I get a medal in every style, and then I was like, well, let's make it a first place in every style.
And then
It
best in shown.
it has to be competition minimum 100 entries. None of these really small competitions.
Yeah.
And then I did that. I'm like, okay, best of show in every style. That's my jumping in on that.
So, but how does one develop that level of fluency? Because
You don't just will it.
it's
I-
right. I mean, you can say you want to do that, but there's something, there's a genius behind that.
or
Also,
there's an
I want to see your medal
obsessive
closet.
compulsive
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah. Somebody was asking me the other day. They're like, how many awards did you win? Are we talking like over 100? I'm like, no, it's more like over 1,000.
Jeez.
They're all. I did not throw them away, but they're in boxes.
Is there
I think.
a heavy box of those somewhere in the room that you're sitting in?
There's like a bunch of boxes in the garage. Some of them I
How-
really appreciate the awards.
How does one achieve that level of fluency?
And
yeah,
humility.
I'm not sure. I think part of it's kind of like an OCD thing where it's like, I have to complete this thing. And
Right, but if I could interrupt for a second, like if I said, and Bobby, you know my brewing better than anybody. If I said, Bobby, I'm going to brew a stout, that stout would have been terrible, and it would have been terrible. And I was fine at brewing. How do you develop that kaleidoscope of styles where you can nail an IPA, you can nail a Doppelbock, you can nail whatever it is you wanted to do, you were doing. It's amazing.
well, it was a lot of hard work. I mean, it took me quite a while to amass all of those. And so when I first started out, I I was like, okay, I should if I want to learn more about beer and beer styles, I got a copy of the BJCP style guide back then, and I read through it, and it listed, beers that, were representative of the style. So I went out and found those. And at first it just started out, what am I going to brew? And once I, brewed one, I was like, okay, I want to brew something else. I want to try a few different things. And so eventually I just went through the entire style guide, and I bought commercial examples. I sought out homebrewed examples. I, read everything I could on, those styles, when and where I could find it back then. And then just brewed many times too, just to figure out what. And one of the things that I mentioned in that book, Brewing Classic Styles, is that the process of, learning about all these styles, perfecting all these styles, brewing all these beers, really gives you a great insight into what the ingredients will do. And the process became easier and easier for me as I went along, because I had learned a lot of the things. I mean, the true difference between, let's say, a dry stout and, a West Coast IPA, a lot of it's just the ingredients. There's not a whole lot of complexity in there, or, it's different ingredients in a, slightly different process. But overall, it's more about, your brewing skills, I think, at that point. And, the more I did it, the better I got. And then it just became easier and easier for me to, come up with new ones based off of, the description in, the BJCP style guide. Now, was it perfect? Here's a good story. And it gets to me all the time. So at the time, I had not tasted any Schwarzbiers, and I couldn't find any available for sale anywhere. None of the craft beer places were making them. No homebrewers were brewing them. You couldn't find it in the store. And but it was on my list of, I was trying to knock them all out. And I got to Schwarzbier, and I'm like, so based on the description in the BJCP style guide, I came up with a recipe, and then entered it, got first place. I'm like, okay, so I guess that's close. When I finally had access to it, commercial examples in, Germany, I'm like, this is different. And some people told me, they go like Dave Saps, I think he goes, it's a little too roasty for Schwarzbier, and I have to agree 100%. It's kind of like an Americanized Schwarzbier, a little more roasty, a little bigger, a little fuller, all that stuff. Well, a friend of mine, he won a medal at GABF for his Schwarzbier, and I told him, he's like, what do you think? I'm like, it's good beer. It's not a good Schwarzbier. I said, I have myself to blame for this, because, regardless of, I did an article for BYO on Schwarzbier, or, pretty much most every style. And I explained there where it went wrong. But by today, like you were saying, everybody's brewing those recipes. And that became like a de facto, this is what a Schwarzbier tastes like. And it's too roasty, it's too full. It's not a great Schwarzbier. It's a slightly different style. So I feel bad about that. But
well, what's funny is if you go type Jamil on a Google search, it will automatically fill that in with like English bitter recipe, English porter, German, whatever. it just because everybody's looking for those recipes you made. They know that when they need to recenter, at the very least, they go back to the source, and that's where that stuff came from in the United States.
And you
Yeah.
find them online, but people
Yeah.
have tweaked them or changed them. They
Well,
didn't
this is
have
true
this
too.
ingredient or that
Yeah.
ingredient, so they used something else.
Yeah.
And then it became somebody. It's like that game of telephone where it goes
Yeah.
through 4 or 5 people, and then I had somebody go say, "Is this your recipe for such and such?" I'm like, "No, not in a million years." And they go, "Well, it's posted on the internet as such." Like,
And just
okay.
a quick note for the audience, BJCP is Beer Judge Certification Program.
Right. And they're just one group that makes the rules as to what makes every style. I know the Brewers Association does that as well. And
Yeah, they have their own. They have their
Mhm.
own in the British version of the
Mhm.
BJCP. And the style guide. People would say, "Well, I don't want to be told what to brew." It's like, well, you're not being told what to brew. It's just styles are more of a shorthand for discussing things. Like earlier when I said a dry stout or an IPA, I didn't have to explain to you that IPA has more hop character to it, and a dry stout is darker and roasty and things like that. We just automatically understood that based off of simple things. Now I can say it's like a dry stout except much bigger and slightly sweeter. You'd understand. We're coming from a common point of reference, which is that's the great value of the style guides. I don't think we should be restricting anybody to bring anything, but if you want to, compare them in a competition or something like that, you need some sort of, guide rails, I think.
And I think that as a pro brewer, it is challenging to enter competitions, not because it's challenging to win medals, although it is. It's because you have to maintain your brand somewhere, and you don't want to become the same thing brewed in another town. At least that's my philosophy. So you have to find your way around that. I think as a pro brewer, I think as a home brewer, when I was doing that, it was maybe about the technicality of how we make these styles the way that they're designed or the way that they're described. But
Right.
yeah, as we go along, I don't think everybody should be trying to brew the same beer as a pro brewer at the end of the day.
Right. And where the spirit takes you and what'll sell best, as a pro brewer.
Amen.
You need to brew things that sell really well, and then that allows you, it's like a lot of artists or actors or whatever. You have to do the commercial stuff in order to do your indie film. You that doesn't make any money at all, but you do it because you love it, and so that's kind of how I addressed it.
My wife's a university professor down the road here, and she says that she gets paid to grade. She doesn't get paid for any of the other hours, and she said it's something like $350 an hour now that she's getting paid to grade papers, because all that other stuff is what she wants to do.
As a teacher, I totally agree with her. I've borrowed that quote many times.
Yeah, exactly.
Of all the styles you've brewed, what has been the most challenging? Was there one that you just took a long time to really get right that you just couldn't nail in the first try?
I think probably the most challenging is got to be kind of the lambic or pseudo lambic collection of styles, because you're working with so many organisms, and if you don't provide exactly the right substrate and conditions, that can be quite tricky. That takes, and if you are doing 1, 2, 3 5-year aged product, it takes a long time to get your final feedback on it, right? So you're in it at least a year, and then you can figure out did it really work out perfectly or not. And so, every time you try, you've got another year to wait.
In your brewing catalog, what has been what's your favorite beer? When you point to your kind of an aha moment where you feel like, oh my gosh, I can really do this and I can do this at a high level. Do you have a beer that maybe fit that category, that was a beer that you just nailed and you knew you nailed it?
I don't know. There was a couple of beers that really stood out to me as a home brewer when I brewed them. There were a couple of beers. The BJCP works on a 50-point scale, and there were a few beers that I got. Judges just don't give out 50s. I don't understand why. If you have no feedback, positive, any sort of criticism that needs to be fixed, well, then it was probably a perfect beer.
I've heard your rant on this a number of times.
Yeah.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, but I got 50s for Flanders Red, which I thought it was quite amazing and tricky to make, and then also Doppelbock from some judges that I really respect. So maybe those. I mean, I was like, once you get a 50, you're like, okay, I was able to brew it so well that they could not refuse that it was brewed well. They could not score it any higher. So it makes you, kind of gives you that feeling. That was the whole reason I entered competitions to start with. Was I remember I had brewed this beer, chocolate hazelnut porter.
I was going to bring that one up. That was my next note.
That sounds
that
lovely.
was first beer I thought, oh, this is good. This is actually really good. And I took it down to the homebrew shop and let people taste it. And homebrew shop owner that was just like, nah, it's okay. You got a long way to go. I'm like, really? I thought this was pretty good. And other people are like, yeah, it's good. And then I realized, well, all your friends will tell you something's good. Everybody else will, even a stranger, it's hard to get them to tell you honestly when you're excited about something, whether it was, well brewed or not. And so they're like, well, if you think it's, well brewed, you should enter it in a competition. Here's this competition, the Maltos Falcons competition. You can send it in now, and we'll see, whether it's a good beer or not. And so I sent it in. I think I got third place, and I was like, that was cool. But what I really found interesting was the score sheets that I got back, because here's 3 people that anonymously, no knowledge of who sent the beer in. And they gave me nice detailed notes of what they tasted and, what they expected and, where they thought I went wrong. And I was like, this is fantastic. This is like a cheat code. I can brew things. I can get somebody to anonymously tell me what they think, and then I can use that to improve the beer. I told myself, I'm like, I'm going to brew this again. I'm going to brew this until, I can, get first place. And so I did. I think the next year I entered it and I got first place. I'm like, see, this works. This is, and same competition, Maltos Falcons. I'm like, this is the way to improve and perfect your brewing. And so I think the very first best of show I got was for the chocolate hazelnut porter, and I think it was at the Maltos Falcons again. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I never really cared about any of the awards and stuff. I just wanted to improve my brewing, and so I found it very fascinating and valuable. Just like doing the podcast, especially the Brew Strong podcast, because one of the things we do is answer a lot of questions, Q&A questions. We answer a ton of them, and people ask all sorts of questions. And so you got to do some research. You've got to, do some experimentation. We've learned a lot over the decades of doing that show. So I appreciate that too.
Jamil, I have wondered often when we have an opportunity, and we've had several, to talk to homebrewers who had the courage to make that jump into the professional brewing realm. What led them to do that? What inspired them to have the confidence to do that? Because I remember brewing and having people by, and after the third beer, they would tell me that, this was the greatest beer that they've ever had. And, obviously that's
You
not
should open
the
a brewery, and
right. You absolutely should open a brewery. What, and Bobby, I'm interested in your take on this too. What was the moment that both of you said, okay, I'm ready to move from accomplished home brewer to owning my own?
And that's going to wrap up this episode of Respecting the Beer. Come back next week as we continue our conversation with Jamil as we ask the question how he went from home brewer to commercial brewer. Be sure to join the Facebook group to stay connected between episodes, and you can support the show over on Patreon, where as little as $4 a month gets you uncut episodes, access to exclusive beer, and a full hour-long video tour of the brewery. But until next time, please remember to respect the beer.